the sports action coming up right here.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
Welcome to Football Full Circle on this Tuesday all across the SportsGrid Radio Network. He is Scott Wetzel. I am Ben Stevens. A Tuesday to recap the finale of week number 3 of this NFL regular season. And not just one game, Scott, on a Monday, but a doubleheader of NFL action to end out week number 3 on a Monday night. So much at stake, albeit only to end out week 3 in those 2 games we saw, one in Cincinnati, one in Western New York. 2 teams went in winless, 2 teams end the night winless as well. The Bengals get beat in Cincy once again as more than a touchdown favorite. The Bills roll in Western New York, handing the Jags their 3rd consecutive loss to start off this season. There is so much to break down from the games themselves. There are so many reactions for the season outlook moving forward, and there's a lot to, of course, recap at the end of week 3 to set the stage for week 4 and beyond.
Yeah, really is. It's amazing, Ben. If you're watching Cincinnati, Washington last night, you're saying, we don't really need 2 Monday Night Football games, right? But if you're watching Buffalo, Jacksonville, you're saying, thank goodness there's 2 Monday Night Football games. So I'm kind of on the fence. I don't really think you need 2, but Survivor Pool players getting whacked again. 7-point, 6-point plus favorites getting whacked again. What a crazy. I tell you, we've had a lot of crazy starts to seasons, obviously. But this one, Ben, first 3 weeks in, it has been amazing how many underdogs have been able to win. Not only cover, but win outright. And maybe we've seen the future of the Washington Commanders, boy. And if so, that is one bright future because Jalen Daniels, to me, he was the story more than anything else last night, how spectacular he was.
Scott, survivor pools around the country in the National Football League might be done by week 3, or maybe just a few players left entering week 4. You mentioned Jaden Daniels, a historic night for Washington's rookie quarterback. And Scott, part of the stakes of last night was not only Daniels' 3rd career game on the road in Cincy or a Monday Night Football doubleheader, but for 2 teams in the Bengals and the Jaguars to figure things out. Because we know how dreadful an 0-2 start is. We know how damning an 0-3 start is. It does not seem to be an overreaction, although it might sound like it is, to say that Cincy's season and Jacksonville's season is now done. Why do I say that? Because never in the history of the National Football League have we seen a winless 0-3 team start the year with 3 straight L's and win a Super Bowl championship. Only one, Scott, since the year 2000 has an 0-3 team started that way and ended up making the postseason. That was the 2018 Houston Texans. So the margin of error is no longer there. The chances for both Cincy and Jacksonville to get to the NFL playoffs this year, and both certainly had those aspirations entering this season, slim to none, and Slim probably already walking out that door. Let's start in Cincy, where for the 2nd time in only 3 weeks, the Bengals were more than a touchdown favorite at home, laying 7.5, and lost outright. Not even barely. Won, not even winning by a touchdown and not covering. Lost outright as Washington goes into Cincy and picks up its 2nd win of the year with a 38-33 victory outright as a 7.5-point underdog.
Yeah. You know, when you go down the season schedules, Ben, at the beginning of the year, and you say, okay, win, loss, I'm not really sure. You kind of calculate all those things when you look at good teams and bad teams for that matter. I mean, I don't know anybody. I mean, nobody had penciled in not only Washington beating Cincinnati, not only New England beating Cincinnati, but those 2 teams doing it in Cincinnati, which just goes to show how tough a way it's going to be for the Bengals, the Bungles now to make the postseason, and they play in the AFC North. They haven't played an AFC North game yet, so that's 6 tough games against Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Baltimore. I think they're the better of the 2 teams between them and Jacksonville. But Jacksonville has the much easier division, maybe an easier road to actually overcome this 0-3 deficit, but certainly the Bengals are up against the lousy football, just lousy football. They didn't force Washington to punt one time, Ben, last night. And this marks 2 – think about how rare that is to go an entire game without punting. Washington has actually done that in back-to-back games. They didn't punt last week, nothing but field goals against the Giants. Yeah. 2 straight games without punting. I don't know if that's ever been done in the NFL.
I can say this about history in terms of what it means in the National Football League. The game last night in Cincinnati, the first NFL game since 1940 without a single punt or turnover in the game. 84 years, the first game without a punt or turnover in that football game. And Scott, we talked about survivor pools. The reason that survivor pools are already coming to a close is what we saw on display last night out of the Commanders. A 7.5-point underdog winning outright. Underdogs of 5.5 points or greater. So far this season, through 3 weeks, 14-2 against the spread with 10 outright victories. We saw 4 underdogs of at least 5.5 points on Sunday win outright, and the Commanders backed that up behind a masterful and historic performance from their rookie quarterback, Jaden Daniels. Scott, he was 21 of 23 last night for 254 yards, his first 2 passing touchdowns of his NFL career. Also was the leading rusher for the Commanders and added his 3rd rushing score already in his first 3 weeks of his NFL career. 21 for 23 completions, 4 attempts. That's a 91.3% completion percentage. It is the best of any rookie quarterback ever in a single game in NFL history with a minimum of 20 attempts. It is the best completion percentage for a single game in the history of the Washington franchise with a minimum of 20 attempts. It was a historic night for Jaden Daniels, leading Washington to a huge upset victory in Cincinnati.
Well, it really was. Like I said, every single time, Ben, Cincinnati made a little bit of a run. You know, they'd score a touchdown and get within 1 score, make a big stop, places going crazy. They just couldn't stop the guy. He was unbelievable. Yep, and that last touchdown pass, if you didn't see it, well, you talk about throwing it, just an absolute perfect pass. Under all the duress and all the pressure, you know, any thought of them, you know, or him in particular, you know, being his first primetime game, you know, not being able to, you know, handle all the pressures and everything, forget about that. Boy, it's just absolutely crazy. And Cincinnati, you know, they're doing more than everyone else. You have all these upsets, but the upset week number 1 against New England, and now this one against Washington, they're doing their fair share for knocking people out of survivor pools. That's for darn sure. But I tell you, Daniels was just spectacular, and as humble as humble can be. So many people on Twitter and on my textbook chain here that I have with my podcast, you know, they all was impressed not only with his performance on the field, but then afterwards, very humble. So it looks like it's, like I said. Now, listen, we saw this a little bit with RG3, and unfortunately injuries derailed his career. But from what we've seen so far, great performance out of him.
A great performance out of the number 2 overall pick, who got the upper hand of Heisman winners from LSU. But on paper, Scott, not on Joe Burrow, 29 of 38 for 324 yards and 3 touchdowns. Jamar Chase over the century mark and into the end zone for the first time this year. He had 2 touchdowns. But one of the reasons I think this game is so much more damning for the Bengals than even the Jaguars is because, yes, both of these teams had playoff aspirations. Jacksonville trying to get back after a disastrous end to their season in 2023. The Bengals with unfulfilled promise in 2023 because of the injury to Joe Burrow. And sadly for Cincy, this the 3rd consecutive season they have started 0-2, but unlike the previous 2 years where they had won week 3 and even covered as the favorite in both of those games, they falter in week 3 this year. And Scott, let's not mince words. It was a peculiar offseason for the Bengals, but the outlook was still championship contender in the AFC and a Lombardi trophy. Never have we seen a team start 0-3 in NFL history and win a Super Bowl. You can throw the Lombardi trophy out for the Bengals. What is the motivation? What is the outlook moving forward? There are exceptions to rules. Of course, there always has to be somebody to buck a trend. We'll talk about it up next on Football Full Circle.
Ball is coming.
Don't look like an idiot at work.
Know your stuff.
Football and everything else.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
Boeing said it made a best and final offer to striking union machinists that includes bigger raises and larger bonuses than a proposed contract that was overwhelmingly rejected. With the SportsGrid News Flash, I'm Trey Westerberg. The company said the offer includes pay raises of 30% over 4 years, up from the rejected 25% raises. The new offer demonstrates Boeing's eagerness to end the strike by about 33,000 machinists that began September 13th. The company introduced rolling furloughs of non-unionized employees last week to cut costs during the strike. California sued ExxonMobil Monday, alleging the oil giant deceived the public for half a century by promising that the plastics it produced would be recycled. Attorney General Rob Bonta's office said that less than 5% of plastic is recycled into another plastic product in the U.S., even though the items are labeled as recyclable. ExxonMobil blamed California for its flawed recycling system. I'm Trey Westerberg with the SportsGrid News Flash.
Whether you own a local business or a global one, you know that these days, generating growth is a challenge. By teaming with Bank of America, you'll not just stay ahead of the curve, you'll move it. With access to experts, award-winning insights, and business solutions so powerful, you'll make every move matter, locally and globally. Visit bankofamerica.com/banking for business to learn more. What would you like the power to do? Copyright 2024 Bank of America N.A.
I can't wait for golf this weekend, huh, buddy? Time flies. Love you, man. Oh, don't forget your knee brace again. We aren't in college anymore.
Moments together matter, so help protect yourself from RSV. If you're 75 or older or 60 plus with a chronic condition like asthma, COPD, heart disease, or severe diabetes, you're at higher risk of landing in the hospital from RSV, and there are no prescription RSV treatments. Check eligibility and schedule your RSV vaccine at vaxassist.com. Sponsored by Pfizer.
Fall is almost here.
It's time to stow the lawnmower and get ready for all that glorious action coming your way. Stay tuned to SportsGrid for all the strategies, angles, and info you need to get the winning edge. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
A Monday night doubleheader to end out week number 3. And yes, it might only be the end of the third week of the NFL season, and you hearing me say that Cincinnati now has zero shot of winning a Super Bowl might sound extreme. I promise you it is not. In the history of the National Football League, we have not seen a team start 0-3 and win a Lombardi Trophy. Scott, is there a chance that Cincy could make history and be the exception of the rule? I presume. Is there a chance the Bengals can even buck a very long-standing trend of starting 0-3 and missing out on the postseason? Only once since the turn of the millennium have we seen a team start 0-3 and make the postseason. The 2018 Texans, I guess. I just don't see it happening. The Bengals' offense has not been the issue. Joe Burrow threw for 324 yards and 3 touchdowns last night. It's been the defense. It's going to be the slate. I think Cincy's season has already come to a close, even after only 3 weeks.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far. We've seen a 16-1 now in the NCAA tournament a couple of times. Thank you, Virginia. So anything is possible. We've seen some crazy things. We've seen the Houston Texans, right, go from last place to first place last year. Nobody thought that. So we've had some crazy things occur over the last 3-4 seasons around the world of sports. Do I think they're going to do it? No, but I wouldn't rule it off, right? If there's one team, like I said before, them versus Jacksonville, I'll say, or some of the other 0-3 teams, if I'm going to pick one 0-3 team that I think can really turn things around, they would be the one. I mean, just the ability last week. I mean, right, one goofy, dopey play by the defensive back, and you want to argue bad call by the official. And, they beat the Chiefs in Kansas City, and we've seen them beat the Chiefs in Kansas City not that long ago in the postseason. So the potential will always be there, Ben, with this Cincinnati team. I did say last week, you just wonder if are we overrating them? Has their time come and gone? I don't know. They put 33 on the board. They had T. Higgins last night. The offense, as you mentioned, wasn't the issue. Defensively, not forcing one punt. And not only that, just every big opportunity, make one stand. And Washington was able to get first down after first down. They had 2nd and 21 on the final drive. They get a first down on that drive even. But I'm not giving up hope. I'm stubborn. I wouldn't be taking them in a survivor pool if I still had them available anytime soon. But I'm not going to give up hope just because they've shown the ability to win on the road in the postseason. I don't think they're going to win their division, 3 back already. I don't think that's going to happen. Yeah. But, would I take them straight up against Buffalo in Buffalo or Kansas City, even in Kansas City? Yeah, I'd give them a fair shot. Why not?
If they can get there. The Bengals' price now to make the postseason is plus 122. It's minus 150 to miss. They are now favored to miss out on the playoffs more so than they are to get in. It was greater than a $2 price for Cincinnati to be a playoff team before the year got started. Jaden Daniels, Scott, as we mentioned, a historic night for the new Washington quarterback. He is the Offensive Rookie of the Year favorite now. We'll take a look at the odds markets for the individual hardware in just a moment. But, of course, it wasn't just one Monday Night Football game. It was 2. To Western New York we go, where Buffalo just scored another touchdown. They beat Jacksonville 47-10 last night, scoring a touchdown on all 5 of their opening offensive possessions in the first half. Josh Allen was great, more than 260 through the air and 4 touchdowns. Jacksonville's defense could not stop anybody. Trevor Lawrence is struggling to start this year. The Jags' offense is failing to put up points. And Scott, if you were to ask me the reason Jacksonville lost last night in Buffalo, it's not because Josh Allen is the MVP favorite. It's not because Doug Peterson's job status is a little bit up in the air. It's not because the Jaguars' defense was abysmal. It's because Jacksonville closed as a 4.5-point underdog when earlier in the day they were getting 5.5 points. Of course, we gave you the trends just a bit ago with what Washington pulled off. Underdogs of 5.5 points or greater this year, 14-2 against the spread. Sadly for the Jags, the market believed in them, and they closed as a 4.5-point underdog in Buffalo.
The boys in Vegas, Ben, must be making a killing this year. Just an absolute killing if you believe line movements are based on how many people are betting them, right? They certainly, were betting them last night. And I'll use this, game to help the Cincinnati Bengals fan, right? Back to that for a second, just because of this. Like, are the Bengals going to be able to make the playoffs? Well, you think about the teams that were going to challenge for playoff spots, right? Miami in a whole heap of trouble, right? Cleveland in a whole heap of trouble. Jacksonville, this game obviously 0-3, a whole heap of trouble. Even Justin Herbert, yeah, right, with all his ankle injuries, who knows how long that's going to last. The Chargers, I don't really think are a playoff team. So, like 3 or 4 or 5 teams. The only one that really kind of emerged is the Jets. It looks like, okay, they're going to be serious contenders. But, a lot of the teams that we figured Cincinnati would be battling for playoff-wise in a lot of trouble. So that's going to help Cincinnati's cause. But for Jacksonville, I don't see it, man. Again, you're going to have people. It's funny. I watched the post-game press conference with Peterson, and don't be media. I'm really just like, it's embarrassing sometimes. They had him on the hook. They had him on the ledge. Peterson goes into his press conference, we're 0-3, played lousy, blah, blah. We got to do a lot of soul searching. Everything's up for grabs, coaching, changes, this, that, whatever, right? So someone says specifically, are you talking about your quarterback as well as far as maybe some changes? And he hemmed and hawed, and he went off on a tangent about injuries. Now, I don't know if he was suggesting that Trevor Lawrence has an injury that we don't necessarily know about, but then the media didn't follow up on that. Just to kind of well, what are you saying then, Coach? Is his job in jeopardy like you're saying everyone else's is? They didn't do that, but then ultimately it goes down. I know they gave up 50 points, whatever it was, 40-plus points, but Trevor Lawrence, I think you seriously do have to wonder, is he a bad quarterback? No. But is he worth $40+ million a year? Are they expecting him to be the greatest quarterback in the NFL like we thought he was going to be coming out of college? Serious doubts about that. Serious doubts.
$55 million per year for Trevor Lawrence. He got the extension. I know. He got the extension this offseason that at the time rivaled Joe Burrow, and then Jordan Love is the highest paid quarterbacks in the history of the NFL. Of course, Dak Prescott, who's got his own questions to answer at the Star in Dallas, is now the $60 million man that beats everybody. But to your point, Scott, and we'll continue our reaction to the Monday Night Football game in Buffalo up next. Trevor Lawrence, 21 of 38 for 178 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. Jacksonville, the third worst scoring offense to start this year in the NFL. We'll debate why next.
There's smart.
And there's not smart.
Not smart is hope as a strategy. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Keep it here.
And win. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. The SportsGrid Radio Network presents This Date in Sports History.
In 1988, Canadian sprinter Ben Johnson breaks his own 100-meter world record with a time of 9.79 at the Seoul Olympics, but is disqualified 3 days later for use of PEDs, and Carl Lewis is awarded gold at a world record of 9.92. In 1920, Babe Ruth becomes the first Major League player to hit 50 home runs in a season. For SportsGrid Radio, I'm Mike DeMurgis.
The Technology Minute with George Capalbo.
Purdue University physicists have opened the world's first quantum disco with the world's tiniest disco ball. And by tiny, I mean a disco ball 1/100th the width of a human hair, made of glowing fluorescent nanodiamonds levitating inside a pure vacuum, spinning 1.2 billion times per minute. The point? Not to improve your platform shoe disco finger, but to simulate what happens to qubits inside a quantum computer. Computing power that could be 150 billion times faster than yesterday's supercomputer. And that's a lot cooler than John Travolta doing the funky chicken. Follow me at Chicapalbo on X and stay tuned to the Technology Minute for more cool stuff like this.
Money line. Times would be 3-0 if Levis just stopped with those turnovers. It's like, and again, there will be times to bet Tennessee, but Will Levis is a problem, Donnie. He is one of the worst quarterbacks in football as long as Will Levis protects the ball. It's like, it's like if you bet the Browns, you're like, man, if Watson gets back to form, this team's incredible. It's not going to happen.
Catch Money Line with Donnie Rightside and Kevin Walsh. Weekdays, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 Pacific on the SportsGrid Radio Network. Wherever you go,
There you are.
download the SportsGrid mobile app and we'll be right there with you.
So now you can get the winning edge
Anywhere. Even while the wife's talking to you.
if you got an earbud.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
Live right here on Football Full Circle, it is FFC. So, Scott, we continue our reactions to the Monday night doubleheader because we learned a lot from Week 3 and now at the end of Week 3. Buffalo, one of 5 undefeated 3-0 teams following 3 weeks of this season. Jacksonville, one of 3 winless teams, 2 of them, by the way, in the same division in the AFC South. And Scott, you made the point that the media should have been a little bit tougher in their questioning of Doug Peterson and what the future of Trevor Lawrence is right now as a starting quarterback. We've already seen one former number 1 overall pick placed on the bench. The number 1 overall pick from this year, Caleb Williams, not looking nearly as good as the number 2 overall selection. And now maybe as we look at the number 1 overall pick from 2021 and Trevor Lawrence, there is a struggle there. Travon Walker also on Jacksonville, not really doing a ton for the Jags to start off this season. So, Scott, as we look at the result last night in Western New York, there is the negative component in the Jaguars starting 0-3. There's the positive outlook for Buffalo, a perfect 3-0. It would be 3-0 against the number, but they missed out covering by a 6.5-point spread by the hook in Week 1 in their dramatic comeback against the Cardinals. Let's stick on Trevor Lawrence for just a second. 220 yards is his peak this year. He has thrown for a touchdown and an interception last night. He had no touchdowns and no interceptions in Week 2 in that dismal loss to Cleveland. So when you look at this team, Scott, when you look at Jacksonville moving forward, Trevor Lawrence, who was banged up for a lot of that rough stretch to end out the year when Jacksonville was 8-3 through 12 weeks. They had a substantial lead in the AFC South and then dropped 5 of their final 6 games to lose out on the divisional crown and the postseason. Trevor Lawrence is now 0-8 straight up in his last 8 starts as the starter in Jacksonville and just 1-7 against the spread. Do the Jags need a change to have any semblance of life moving forward?
Well, if they were to make a change, it wouldn't be at quarterback, right? You don't give a guy $55 million a year, a month ago, literally, and then all of a sudden yank him after 3 games. The change would be at head coach, right? That's where it would be. You could say it's Doug Peterson's fault. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. Who knows? The guy was a hero 2 years ago. Last year, a little blip on the radar screen, and so far nothing this season. But that's where you would make the change. I mean, that's why I wanted the media to basically force Peterson to say that. Like, no, we're going to evaluate everybody else, but I can't be taking my $55 million a year quarterback out of the starting lineup, realistically, right? So you fire generally, Ben, right? What happens first, right? The pecking order is offensive coordinator goes first, then your head coach, or then maybe you'd pull the quarterback. But there's no way they're pulling Trevor Lawrence outside of an injury. Maybe they want to make up some kind of injury for this year and say he needs to rest for a week or so. But, at first it would be the offensive coordinator, then the head coach. But they're just not a good football team. It makes you look back 2 years ago and say, how did they accomplish that? Was that the anomaly, or was this year and then even parts of last year the anomaly, right? Who were the real Jacksonville Jaguars? I don't see it. I mean, it's just defensively, same thing. Now, again, you give up them as many points, they're not going to look good defensively, but
for sure.
It has not looked good for them, in games that they could score, and it hasn't looked good for them offensively in games in which the defense played well. They blew an early lead against the Dolphins, a 2-score lead. Couldn't score last week worth anything, against the Browns. And so, and you saw what the Giants did against the Browns this week. So you really just begin to wonder about Jacksonville.
Scott, they scored all 17 points, did Jacksonville, in their opener against Miami in the opening half. They have scored 23 total points in the last 5 halves of football. They are averaging 13.3 points per game overall this year, third worst scoring offense in the National Football League. Trevor Lawrence needs to be better. He is not right now. And the Jags, again, were thought of as a potential playoff contender in the competitive AFC. And we have only seen one team since the millennium start 0-3 and make it to the postseason. Again, the 2018 Houston Texans. Now, Scott, we'll talk about Buffalo, and we'll continue the conversation on the other side of the break, no doubt. But the Bills are a team we have had high expectations for each of the past half decade around the NFL. They've won 4 consecutive AFC East crowns, and yet this year, Scott, with so much reworking offensively, we thought, maybe there's going to be a regression in Buffalo. They did not enter the year as the favorites to win the AFC East. How do you feel about the Bills now?
Yeah, a little different now, right? Those wide receivers that were so inexperienced and we weren't sure of and everything else. Not a bad Buffalo Bills team with everything is said and done. How about that? Josh Allen is happy, too.
He's happy, and he's got the best passer rating in the NFL, and he hasn't thrown a pick just yet. More on Buffalo up next on FFC.
The winning edge.
You've got it.
But not everybody has it, because not everybody listens to us.
But we're working on that.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
Progressive presents the SportsGrid Sports Flash. I'm Chuck Sanders. AP Top 25 football this week. No change among the top 4. Texas remains number 1 at 4-0 with 3-0. Georgia at number 2. The Ohio State Buckeyes are 3-0 and remain number 3, while the Alabama Crimson Tide are 3-0 and are number 4. Tennessee up 1 spot this week to number 5. The Volunteers are 4-0. Ole Miss dipped a spot to number 6. They're 4-0. 4-0 Miami up a spot to number 7. 3-0 Oregon up 1 spot to number 8. Penn State's number 9 up 1 spot. They're 3-0. Utah jumped 2 spots to number 10. They're 4-0. The biggest jump this week, Michigan up 6 spots to number 12. The Wolverines are 3-1. Couple of big drops. Oklahoma and Oklahoma State each down 6 spots. The Sooners number 21. The Cowboys number 20. Kansas State fell 10 spots to number 23. Bundle auto and home, renters or condo, and save with Progressive. That's the SportsGrid Sports Flash. I'm Chuck Sanders.
I'm still going for it, even with higher stroke risk from atrial fibrillation and a regular heartbeat not caused by a heart valve problem. Over a 3-year study, Eliquis apixaban tablets reduce stroke risk better than warfarin, and over 97% of Eliquis patients did not experience a stroke. A first stroke occurred in 2.9% of warfarin patients versus 2.3% of Eliquis patients.
Don't stop taking prescription Eliquis without asking your doctor. It may increase your stroke risk. Eliquis can cause serious and, in rare cases, fatal bleeding. Don't take Eliquis if you have an artificial heart valve, abnormal bleeding, or or antiphospholipid syndrome. While taking, you may bruise more easily or take longer for bleeding to stop. A spinal injection while on Eliquis increases risk of blood clots, which may cause paralysis, the inability to move. Get medical help right away for unexpected bleeding, unusual bruising, or tingling, numbness, or muscle weakness. Medications such as aspirin products, NSAIDs, SSRIs, SNRIs, and blood thinners may increase bleeding risk. Tell your doctor about all planned medical or dental procedures. Learn more at Eliquis.com or call 1-855-ELIQUIS.
Days are getting cooler.
The shadows are getting longer.
You know what that means.
It's football weather. So bundle up and keep it here for all the latest strategies and gridiron information.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
The Buffalo Bills, one of 5 unbeaten 3-0 teams at the end of Week 3 of this 2024 NFL regular season. Josh Allen, Scott, is playing like an NFL MVP favorite and a frontrunner. And that's with a completely reworked offense and his pass catchers and playmakers on that side of the football. Last night, in one of the 2 Monday Night Football games against Jacksonville, Josh Allen, 263 yards, 4 touchdowns, 23 of 30 was Buffalo's leading rusher with 44 yards on the ground, averaging better than 7 yards per carry. Khalil Shakir has become that top target in Buffalo, 72 yards and a touchdown. Dalton Kincaid, the promising young tight end, a touchdown, and Keon Coleman finding the end zone as well, the rookie wideout from Florida State. James Cook has had at least 85 scrimmage yards in each of the first 3 games for the Bills. All of this to say, Scott, Buffalo is rolling right now and off to this 3-0 beginning.
Yeah, it really are. It's amazing. You know, I played a little hunch last night. Sometimes knowledge can be a dangerous thing, right? So I looked it up. I knew Josh Allen hadn't thrown an interception in the first 2 games. So I looked it up, Ben. He had only gone 3 straight games without throwing an interception one time in the last 4+ seasons, right? So you talk about a guy that was like overdue for an INT last night. But he came close a couple times in the first half. He made some, questionable passing decisions. But ultimately, he did not throw an INT for only the second time in the last 4+ seasons. So took maybe a little dig at Stephon Diggs afterwards. I don't know. If you watched the presser, he was asked about spreading the ball around to a lot of different receivers. I think 8 different receivers called passes last night. And he transitioned that into, these guys don't complain about not getting the ball. They go to practice, and sometimes it comes their way, sometimes it doesn't. And ultimately, he says, Ben, it's nice to be with a bunch of players that really don't care about stats or anything else. All they care about is winning. So is that a shot at Stephon Diggs? Maybe, but he was talking about his current players. But was he thinking about Diggs perhaps in the back of his mind? I don't know. But that's why I mentioned he's happy. Obviously you're going to be happy after a win, and they're 3-0. Why wouldn't he be? But he does seem a little bit more jovial this year. So less pressure on him. As you mentioned, they weren't expected to win the division. Close, but that they weren't the odds-on favorite. Right. And so far, I look at it as good as you can look. And listen, beating Jacksonville, which was supposed to challenge for a playoff spot, beating the Dolphins, which obviously were supposed to challenge for a playoff spot, and then Arizona, we've seen how dangerous they could be 2 weeks ago. So when they annihilated the Rams, so they've beaten like 3 halfway decent football teams. Buffalo's for real. They're bad. Not that they went anywhere, but so I won't say they're back, but they clearly have not gone anywhere, and they're going to be a force to be reckoned with when everything is said and done.
Of quarterbacks who have even started a game this year, but at least multiple games, Josh Allen has the best passer rating in the National Football League. Andy Dalton has the second best passer rating. He has only started 1 game. But Dalton was even sacked twice. So for Josh Allen, who in his 3 starts has only been sacked twice, it's the least amount given up around the NFL. Scott, there are 15 quarterbacks that have thrown at least 4 touchdowns so far this year in the National Football League. Not overwhelming numbers, but 15 who have thrown 4 or more. Only 2 have not also thrown an interception. Josh Allen, 7 touchdowns, 0 INTs, those 7 TD passes, second most in the NFL, only behind Sam Darnold and Joe Burrow, who also has thrown 5 touchdowns and 0 interceptions, but also has 0 wins to show for it, where Josh has 3. That best passer rating in the NFL. And Scott, Buffalo has always been a fascinating team that for the last 3, 4, 5 years around the NFL, entering the season, that's the optimistic team That's the team that hadn't proven it yet. But if this was the year, this is the time to talk Josh Allen and the Bills in Western New York. Except really entering 2024 because of all the changing faces on both sides of the football. Buffalo entered the year at plus 750 to win the AFC, but it was the 5th best number behind the Ravens, the Bengals, even the Jets were in front of them, and of course, the Kansas City Chiefs, where oftentimes Buffalo has been step for step, neck and neck with KC from the odds perspective, preseason or throughout the season, to win a conference crown and contend for a Super Bowl. Well, that's where Buffalo is once again at the end of week 3. Second best Super Bowl price at plus 750 alongside San Fran, only behind Kansas City, the Chiefs at 5-1. KC remains the favorite in the AFC at plus 240, but Buffalo now the second best number, only back by $1.50 at plus 390. Does Buffalo deserve to be right there with the second best price in the AFC?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what we said, right? You look at some of the teams that were supposed to challenge, kind of like last year. We did the same drill last season. All these great teams in the AFC, and then they all kind of fell by the wayside as each week went by, whether it's Miami this week, whether it's the Chargers, whether it's the Browns not being any good, whether it's Jacksonville not being any good. I mean, it's almost like a game of Survivor in the NFL, their own little game of Survivor. Which teams could just, maintain status quo. And with all those other teams going down, someone's got to go up. So why not the Buffalo Bills, right? I mean, but ultimately, Ben, I don't think they're playing with house money. I really only think the only team in the AFC that's playing with house money, meaning they don't have to win it all to be judged a successful year, are the Houston Texans. But if you're Buffalo or you're Baltimore or you're Cleveland that's never gone to a Super Bowl, or it's Miami or the Jets, these all teams are going to be judged on how'd you do in the postseason. And if you don't at least get to the Super Bowl, as good a year as it may be for the Buffalo Bills, but if they ultimately lose, and God forbid they should lose to Kansas City again, right? That would be the worst thing in the world. So it's a nice year and a good start, and you're encouraged, but it's almost like you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, if you're the Buffalo Bills, because no one was expecting this so far.
Yeah, Scott, it's a really good point, right? The expectations have been there in the preseason in years past. They have faltered on that. The expectations are back in Western New York, where the Bills are not just expected to be good in the regular season and contend for a 5th straight AFC East crown. It's can they finally make some noise in the postseason? They've won 4 consecutive divisional titles in the AFC East. The first year they made it to the AFC Championship game, they lost to Kansas City. The last 3 years, they have been bounced in the divisional round. The last 2 years, they have hosted said divisional round game. So 3 of the 4 years, they have won the AFC East. They have been bounced by the divisional round. 3 of the 4 years, they have won the AFC East prior. They have been bounced by the Kansas City Chiefs. That is what still stands in the way for Buffalo. But as of this moment, they have looked incredibly impressive. 6th best scoring defense in the NFL, and they gave up 17 of the 28 Arizona scored week 1 in the opening half. So 11 points in the 4th quarter to the Cardinals, only 10 allowed in each of the past 2 weeks. And Scott, again, for Josh Allen, his kryptonite throughout his career, even as the Buffalo Bills have won 4 straight AFC East crowns, and it's been a fair criticism, his ability to put the ball in harm's way, take way too much risk, and turn it over. He did fumble against the Cardinals in week number 1, but has not thrown an interception yet. Josh Allen is a co-favorite now to win the NFL MVP award at plus 250 alongside Patrick Mahomes. I completely disagree with Patrick Mahomes being booked as the favorite. I understand individual success means team success, but by his own admission, Mahomes has said he has to be better. He's got 5 touchdowns to 4 interceptions already this year. He has thrown an INT in all 3 games for Kansas City. In my mind, Scott, Josh Allen should be the solo favorite to win the NFL MVP award. If it's not shorter than Mahomes at these current plus 250 prices, make Allen 3-1 and Patrick Mahomes 5-1, plus 550, 6-1. He should not be a co-favorite alongside Josh Allen at this moment.
Yeah, Mahomes is just like the afterthought, right? It's just like he's the default. If you're going to play in the game, who are we going to go to? All right, we'll just do Patrick Mahomes right now. I think that's why his numbers are so low.
No doubt about it, right? And we always say, especially for the MVP award, the most valuable player, individual success needs team success. They go hand in hand, and they do correlate. And the Chiefs, like the Bills, 2 of the 5 teams that are unbeaten after 3 weeks. We'll talk Offensive Rookie of the Year next.
Yeah, it's getting cooler.
Football weather is here.
Stay tuned for all the latest odds, strategies, and info. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
Boeing said it made a best and final offer to striking union machinists that includes bigger raises and larger bonuses than a proposed contract that was overwhelmingly rejected. With the SportsGrid News Flash, I'm Trey Westerberg. The company said the offer includes pay raises of 30% over 4 years, up from the rejected 25% raises. The new offer demonstrates Boeing's eagerness to end the strike by about 33,000 machinists that began September 13th. The company introduced rolling furloughs of non-unionized employees last week to cut costs during the strike. California sued ExxonMobil Monday, alleging the oil giant deceived the public for half a century by promising that the plastics it produced would be recycled. Attorney General Rob Bonta's office said that less than 5% of plastic is recycled into another plastic product in the U.S., even though the items are labeled as recyclable. ExxonMobil blamed California for its flawed recycling system. I'm Trey Westerberg with the SportsGrid News Flash.
Every business faces challenges, but complicated, expensive, and uncertain shipping shouldn't be one of them.
With USPS Ground Advantage from the United States Postal Service, you can avoid all the noise.
No more unexpected surcharges, hidden fees, or complex rate structures.
It's just easy, cost-effective, and dependable shipping. Tune your business's frequency to success and turn shipping to your advantage. Learn how at USPS.com/advantage. USPS Ground Advantage. Simple, affordable, reliable.
Total Wireless is made to totally keep up with you. We now have unlimited data that never slows you down, covered by the Verizon 5G network, and all for less than $30 a month when you get 4 lines. And the best part, we give you a free Samsung Galaxy A54 5G when you switch to the Total 5G Plus Unlimited plan. Visit your local Total Wireless store today. Total Wireless, we're totally with you. Actual speeds may vary by location. For data management practices, see TotalWireless.com.
Ask any player and they'll tell you any advantage is important.
That's where we come in.
SportsGrid delivers gaming strategies and analysis 7 days a week.
The winning edge.
It's your advantage to more winning
more often.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
After a masterful and historic performance, we have a new favorite not only to win the NFL MVP, that's Josh Allen, but the Offensive Rookie of the Year award as well. That's Jaden Daniels. Now down to a plus 145 price, Scott, to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. Caleb Williams, not only no longer the favorite, but not the second or third best number. He sits in fourth. It was Caleb at a plus 140 price entering the year to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. Now it's Washington's Jaden Daniels. Of course, you are going to compare the two quarterbacks. They went 1 and 2. Caleb won the Heisman Trophy in 2022. Jaden Daniels a season ago in 2023. But Scott, there is no doubt that through 3 weeks, Jaden Daniels deserves to be the favorite. He has not only pulled off the historic feats we mentioned yesterday for rookie quarterbacks, the best ever completion percentage for a rookie in an NFL game ever with a minimum of 20 attempts. He has the best completion percentage in the National Football League. 76 pass attempts, 61 completions, a completion percentage of north of 80. It is the best completion percentage around the NFL. Jaden Daniels has not been making those rookie mistakes that we have seen both out of Caleb Williams and even Denver's Bo Nix.
Yeah. The only thing I'd say really with both these guys is that they have no problem both scrambling, right? So you could be sitting on a winning ticket, week number 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever, and then all of a sudden the guy goes out and both teams maybe would be ultra conservative and he sits out the rest of the season or misses 5 or 6 games, whatever the case may be. And all of a sudden that winning ticket is no longer a winning ticket. So, and listen, Caleb Williams threw for over 300 yards this past week. They lost the football game, made some mistakes, but at least you saw some numbers out of him this week. So it's not necessarily a bad ticket to be holding on to, right? All right, Greg Daniels was spectacular, just beyond spectacular last night. But, 3 games in, it took him 3 games to throw his first touchdown passes. So You know, and to think that he's going to be like he was last night going forward every single game, I think is probably asking too much out of a rookie quarterback. So, you know, if you were going to buy into this market, and for me personally, it's not enough money. I think those two are the standouts, you know, so probably will be one of those two. But, you know, if you were going to do it, now would be the time to buy into Caleb Williams.
Mixed in between those two guys is the Giants rookie wideout Malik Neighbors, who has had 3 touchdown catches each of the past 2 weeks, and Marvin Harrison Jr., who has certainly come along in the last 2 weeks for Arizona. Scott, one of the conversations around Caleb Williams entering the year with a short price that I felt was justified is because oftentimes, unlike many other awards, the MVP, the Heisman Trophy, if a quarterback can win it, the quarterback does. And the Offensive Rookie of the Year, that's not always the case. Only 3 of the past 6 have played quarterback. Of course, most recently, C.J. Stroud, but only 4 QBs in the last 10 years have won Offensive Rookie of the Year. Why is that? Because we put team success with quarterbacks more than most. Fair or unfair, wins and losses are prescribed with the quarterback, not the offensive line, not the wide receivers, not running backs. So you can put up good stats, but be on a bad team. That hinders your candidacy as a quarterback. If a wideout puts up good stats on a bad team, look how marvelous this player was. So again, as that pertains to Caleb Williams, the Bears were expected with Caleb to have a very successful year, to be a winning football team. The Bears win total has dropped to 7.5. It's the same win total for the Commanders. Well, if you look at 3 weeks, Washington has a winning record. They're 2-1. They won outright as more than a touchdown underdog in Cincinnati. Maybe some of the overall team success we were given to Chicago might be thrown out to the Commanders right now.
Yeah, maybe. You know, the one thing also that obviously he had in his favor, Daniels, is he did it on national TV, right? This was like his coming out party. Not that a number 2 overall pick necessarily needed a coming out party, but he does this against the Giants in a 1 o'clock game with 9 other games going on. It's like, okay, great game, terrific, see you later, you know? But he does it, you know, on a Monday night, second game as well, and the first game's a blowout, so anyone that was watching football last night was watching him. You know, the bad thing for him, though, is in Washington, they're not on prime time too often. There's only a couple more times. So, but maybe he just needed last night's performance for everyone now to be going to the waiver wire in their fantasy football, trying to pick this guy up. And all the attention is on him. Neighbors is interesting, you know, Ben, because he's with the Giants. It's New York, and he's probably going to be on a bad team. He's got a, you know, mediocre quarterback at best. So any numbers he puts up, I think it's going to be perceived as, in spite of Daniel Jones, in spite of the Giants, Neighbors is doing all this stuff versus the Bears, you know, expected to make the playoffs, or at least, you know, realistic hopes, and maybe Washington, similar type of thing. Not quite the same, but, you know, if Daniels puts up all these numbers in 30 to 27 losses, you know, the idea is, all right, they're not really playing great defense. They're down 2 scores. Who cares? So Neighbors might be the one with the Giants.
Yeah, it is a good point, Scott, right? Because if Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams kind of regress to the mean, where they're putting up good numbers and they're playing decent football, but the teams are 6-11, 7-10, maybe even sub 500, their shot of winning the award takes a hit. If you're seeing crazy stats and numbers out of guys like Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr. We shall see. Jaden Daniels is the only of the 3 rookie quarterbacks that have started this year to not throw an interception. He only has 2 touchdown passes. Bo Nix yet to throw a touchdown pass. Caleb threw his first 2 this past week as well, but also with 2 interceptions. Both Williams and Nix have had multiple games of multiple INTs so far this season. All right, Scott, so that's our reactions after week 3. There's a lot to get to in news and notes around the NFL, and we'll start with some injury concerns in San Francisco. Christian McCaffrey is going to Germany to see an injury specialist on his Achilles tendonitis. Scott, it is never a good sign for your healing process if you have to go to Germany to test something out that is not FDA approved. This could be a very significant amount of time missed for Run CMC.
Yeah, this is bizarre, right? I mean, again, you're going to, not only are you going to Germany, you can't fly a doctor from Germany to you. I mean, you got all the money in the world, right? I mean, you're going to actually have to physically go over there. A lot of people thought the Niners were going to come back to the pack. I didn't see it, but you know what? We're getting signs of it, Ben.
A 1-2 start, Javon Hargrave, who has been one of the anchors of their defensive line in the middle of it as a nose tackle, now likely to miss the rest of the year with a triceps injury. Brock Purdy is even listed as day-to-day with back soreness. He's had to carry the team so far. We'll talk about it up next.
The boys of summer become the champions of fall.
The World Series is on its way.
And SportsGrid brings you every angle. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. SportsGrid TV and radio networks are the premier streaming video and audio channels dedicated to serving the sports wagering audience. Found on major smart TV platforms and streaming on SportsGrid Radio and SiriusXM Channel 159. SportsGrid's real-time data, expert commentary, and entertaining analysis transform viewers into informed sports enthusiasts. Our weekday radio lineup begins with the early line at 8 a.m. Eastern with Ben Stevens and Donnie Rightside. Donnie joins Kevin Walsh on Moneyline at 11 a.m. Eastern, followed by Football Full Circle at noon Eastern. Kaplan and crew join the party at 1 p.m. Eastern, and Pharrell Coast to Coast keeps things rolling from 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern. Get in the mix with Kevin Walsh and Game Time Decisions at 6 p.m. Eastern. Evenings simmer with Carver and Lisi, then boils over with Gabe Moritzi on Sports Rage Late Night at 10 p.m. Eastern. To find out where to find SportsGrid that's best for you, go to sportsgrid.com. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
How would you like to get high-speed internet for your home for less than $2 a day? That's right. For about $50 a month, you'll get lightning fast internet. Are you paying less than $50 a month right now for your internet? Then call Whole Home Connect right now for blazing fast internet at $50 a month with no price increases, no hidden fees, no contracts, no upfront costs, no equipment fees. It's a great deal. And guess what? You can try it for 15 days. If you don't like it, you get your money back. But you're gonna love it, and you're gonna love the price. Internet for your home for $50 a month. That's less than $2 a day. Plus, no contracts, no upfront costs, no equipment fees, and our 15-day guarantee. Call now. 800-797-1292. 800-797-1292. 800-797-1292. That's 800-797-1292.
Think of us as your cool roommate that has this innate gift of somehow always picking winners and never bugs you about doing the dishes or paying rent. Sports gaming strategies and information 24/7.
Get the winning edge.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
Injuries starting to pile up after 3 weeks of this NFL season. And Scott, when your optimism for a season and your aspirations are Lombardi Trophy or bust, you do not want to be one of the teams with a long list of injury concerns in the opening month of the year. That is the case for San Francisco. As we shared before the break, Christian McCaffrey headed to Germany, not for a Munich game, but to see an injury specialist because of his Achilles tendonitis. Never a good sign. He's already on injured reserve. If he's having to go to Germany, is there a thought he won't be ready by week 6? Javon Hargrave likely out for the year, one of the anchors of the interior space of their defensive line. And Brock Purdy, day-to-day now, says Kyle Shanahan, with back soreness. Scott, not on that list that we mentioned. George Kittle, who missed Sunday's game in L.A., and Deebo Samuel, who's going to miss multiple weeks with a calf injury. It is not good for the Niners as of this moment.
Yeah, you throw in Ben Seattle sitting there at the top of the division at 3-0, and you're 1-2 somehow or another, finding a way to lose to the Rams. It's not like, okay, we're a game back, and we're going to catch Seattle, no big deal, right? You don't have that luxury anymore with that last second loss to the Rams this past week. So as I mentioned before the break, a lot of people thought, at least a certain amount of people thought that maybe this San Fran would come back to the pack. I didn't really see it, but. 1-2, everybody is injured. Brandon Ayuk, just throw that out there. He was non-existent, Ben. Jennings was terrific for San Fran. Here's a guy in Ayuk that cried and bitched and moaned right all off season. I want a new contract. I want out of here. I'm great. I'm this. I'm that. Here's a chance for you to be the man. No Samuel, no McCaffrey, no Kittle, right? And he's basically invisible against the Rams. So I'm not a big Brandon Ayuk fan.
I mean, Scott, I drafted him on both of my fantasy teams with the idea that he got paid and he's been Brock Purdy's favorite target in their year and a half together. He had 10 targets on Sunday in LA and only 5 catches. It was the Jawan Jennings day, 11 grabs, 175 yards, and 3 touchdowns. A little bit of moving markets here for San Francisco. Earlier in the day, Scott, they were plus 460, only 40 cents in front of the Eagles to win the NFC. That number has worked back for San Francisco at plus 360. But after week 1, I remember distinctly, the Niners were half the price and then some of everybody else around the NFC. Now that gap is much closer than it was after just 3 weeks. You can look at some other teams that are a perfect 3-0 within the National Football League. The Seahawks, like you mentioned, in a division where everybody else, including the Niners, Rams, and Cardinals, are 1-2. The Vikings are a perfect 3-0. Good news on Sam Darnold's knee injury. No structural damage. He should be ready to go. The Vikings have a huge game in Lambeau on Sunday against the Packers, where we are more than likely going to see Jordan Love return, but they're a perfect 2-0 with Malik Willis as the starting quarterback. By the way, Scott, Minnesota and Green Bay, both a 10-1 number right now to win the NFC, alongside the Cowboys, tied for the 4th best price. The Lions in front of them at 6-1.
Yeah, do you buy into Minnesota? Remember, they don't have T.J. Hawkinson yet. We'll let them get Hawkinson in another week or two and see how good that offense can be, right? I mean, are we really, like, if you're going to buy into Minnesota, now's the time to do it. You know, out of the 3-0 teams that are, like, really 3-0, I give them a better chance than I do Seattle. I just think the upside is limited with Seattle, and I think they've been benefit of a pretty easy schedule so far. But Minnesota, that's the one. You know, is Sam Darnold really going to be this good the entire season? I have my doubts, Ben. I really do. But you got to be impressed so far.
You would have to, Scott. He's in a great situation, though, and there's a lot of buy-in in Minneapolis with him under the tutelage of Kevin O'Connell, who leads the National Football League in passing touchdowns. It's Sammy D. Sam Darnold's got 8 passing TDs this year, the second best passer rating of quarterbacks who have started multiple games this season. Scott, some more injury news for the LA Chargers. Justin Herbert, good news on the MRI. His x-rays were negative, but still going to be dealing with this ankle injury. But if you want to keep a hobbled quarterback upright, you need the staples of your offensive line, your tackles. Rashawn Slater, probably going to miss some time. Joe Alt, the rookie right tackle, also probably going to be sidelined for a few weeks. The Chargers host the Chiefs as a 7.5-point underdog on Sunday.
Yeah, I think, you know, nice start to the season, 2 wins, but I think when everything comes push to shove, they're going to be an under 500 football team.
Derwin James, the safety, also suspended for a game for being a repeat violator of illegal hits in the National Football League. He is Scott Wetzel. I'm Ben Stevens. That does it for Football Full Circle on this Tuesday. FFC returns tomorrow, noon Eastern time, here on SportsGrid Radio.
Now you've done it.
You found the advantage for gaming, odds,
and more.
But we call it the winning edge for short. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.